hello. We are making a video together. The baby dog and mama. It is a beautiful, beautiful sunny afternoon. I don't know what day it is. I only know it's May 16, 2026. That is what we have. So time goes by fast. My goodness. For grandmothers particularly. This is like sci-fi accelerated perception or something. It is warm in the sun, but I can't be sitting in the sun. I get sunburned. And in the shade it is about 60 degrees. And when it's 60 degrees, I have to wear full winter gear, winter outfit, t-shirt underneath, puffer jacket, sweatpants, and puffer pants on top, and winter boots as well. So, and winter hat over my ears, everything. Oh God. It's just the only thing's missing is gloves, but I don't need gloves because my hands are warm. But my hands are only warm because I'm wearing the winter outfit. So in bed too, I have to, in the bedroom, it's always like almost all year round, it's 60 degrees in the bedroom. In the summer and fall as well. In the winter it can get to 45 in the bedroom, but that's why we turn the heaters on during the winter time. So, and then we have it about 60 degrees. So, but we haven't been using a heater recently because it's always been consistently 60 degrees. So, and that is what it is in this area here. Okay. And it has plus and it has minus. So plus and minus. But even in LA, I used to be standing in front of the heater, and Paul's dad, Ernie, was standing in front of the heater too. We stood there together in front of the heater, shivering, because Paul always turned the temperature down, and I didn't like that at all. But even in LA, it gets pretty chilly in the winter time. So. But it doesn't get that much colder in the winter time here because we're still at the ocean. We're just north of LA, much further north. So, but because of the maritime climate, it keeps the temperature in a balance. So, because of the high moisture in the air and the moisture from the ocean, that ocean gets heated up all summer long, and then it still radiates out moisture from the ocean that is still heated up, and that happens all winter long. But of course not to the degree where you can be sitting outside in a t-shirt in the winter. You can't do that. Some people walk barefoot in the winter over the beach. I couldn't do it. I would get a bladder infection. I see surfers in the winter too with the wetsuit, but I couldn't do it. I mean, if you exercise a lot, maybe you can get warm, but my feet would get so cold in my hands too, even if I exercise. So, yeah, it is what it is. It's a little windy today. But look at this tree there. Look at that. Look at this amazing tree. I don't know if it shows. It's amazing, amazing. There. Amazing. There. The amazing tree next to the spruce. There's a large, beautiful spruce, and next to the spruce is a tree with an abundance of these off-white little petals, and it's just the whole tree is completely like it had snow on it, but it's all petals, petals over petals over petals over petals, and there are many other white flower petals all over the place, from the blackberries, from this melon manroot, and from the apple tree. There was a swallow, I think that flew by. So, and very often there are ravens that sit up in the crown of the spruce, and they talk to me. And they make clicking sounds, and very interesting sound. Cluck, 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 cluck. Very fast, almost like something electronic. Yeah, so they make amazing sounds, and then they make these vocalizing sounds with the vocal cords. That's why in German they're called Rabe. Because of that. It's a phonetics name. So, yeah, and crows, of course, they make crow, 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 crow. They have a lighter voice than the Rabe, rab, 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 rab. And I always talk to them. I mimic their sounds, and I talk to them in English, of course, sometimes in German. So it's always nice. I like this is a beautiful backyard now, even though there is kind of like a commercial zone behind that hedge, commercial parking lot and all of that, and sometimes commercial sounds, which is not good. But the vegetation has all grown up, and I wanted to grow up real tall, just like this English laurel. I wanted to grow up 20 feet tall all the way around us, and real thick, like 8 feet thick, so that we have like a barrier. We have an enclave of nature here. That's what I want. That's what I find absolutely beautiful and gorgeous. And I've had debates with neighbors over this in the past, like fundamentalists, that it seems like these fundamentalists, they don't even appreciate nature at all. They don't appreciate hedges. And I kept telling that guy, in England they grow these real tall and thick hedges with English laurel and other hedge plants, and they make maze gardens with it. The castle compound is surrounded by those tall and thick hedges. It looks absolutely classic, it looks regal, it looks amazing. But these Christian fundamentalists here in the United States, on average, they seem to not appreciate these. They don't even appreciate Mozart's Requiem, which is like, hello, it was written for the Christian church. But the beauty of it is, that's what makes fundamentalists insecure, is the genius of Mozart. And when you're dealing with a genius, it doesn't matter what contract work they have been assigned with. Their contract work will never be cookie cutter, template limited. They will, and even if there are very strict demands from whatever, a royal court or whatever, that they will contract someone like him, or Johann Sebastian Bach too, they contract him with highly pious, religious demands of organ works and so on. But if you listen closely, and you don't even have to listen closely, that's why the Christian fundamentalists are scared when they're dealing with a genius like Bach and Mozart or Beethoven. Okay? When they're dealing with a genius like that, because these geniuses, they live in a different realm. Okay, they are not only here on Earth. Okay, they are infinite. They're tapped into the infinite cosmos, and that's a real God. That is what God is. Okay, that is what people are trying to wrap their heads around, which they will never be able to, because it's infinite. You can't wrap your head around infinity, and it's okay. And Jason Paget knows that. Jason Paget, the amazing mystic Jason Paget, who had the experience of not just a lifetime, but the experience of history itself. Okay, I mean, this man is a historic figure. Okay, you better appreciate him. You better subscribe to Jason Paget. Okay, so Jason and then Paget, Padget. Okay, so I hope I spelled this correctly. So please subscribe to him. It has to have check mark. So the real Jason Paget, okay, please. Not the ones that hitchhike with him. But he understands infinity because he had an experience that is so out of the ordinary that a lot of scientists don't even want to talk about it. They'd rather ignore and let's just not talk about that case. So so we can preserve our identification with old school science and so on. And that's how they function. That's also how the fundamentalists function. Okay, whatever leaps out and bounds out of the confines of their religious beliefs, which all the geniuses are doing. Elon Musk, Donald Trump. Look at Donald Trump. Is he confined to the confines of political correctness or political rules that are all idiotic rules? Whoever has established those, no, he doesn't. He always leaps out because he doesn't. There's no way he can fit into this. He can never put himself into a gestation crate like that, where he's totally bound by bars, not just confined, but literally pinned down. But that's what the pigs are going through on a daily basis, by the way. Stand up against it. So no genius will put up with it. It's not just that they don't put up with it. Their very nature, almost like a ghost, is already besides themselves and out besides the norm. No matter what you're trying to do with these people, if you give Bach or Mozart a religious contract order to write a requiem or a mass or a lacrimosa or something like this, or a very heavy organ work or something, if you listen to it with an open mind, you see that the music is infinite. It's infinity. Or the Goldberg variations by Johann Sebastian Bach, for example, particularly played by Glenn Gould. And you probably know it from The Silence of the Lambs. Okay, so Hannibal Lecter is in Baltimore in a high security prison. He's been transported there, and he took that as his advantage to escape, because he's always thinking 10, 100, 200 chess moves ahead, and he just found someone's ball pen and took the back of the ball pen and opened his handcuffs with that. Even though he was in handcuffs and in prison, he then managed to get out and do all of these things. as you know, all know what he did. Okay, I watched that movie 10 times. So the first time watching it, I was so bamboozled. Everything was so fast, like bamboozle. No, there's no way. I was 26, and I was like totally bamboozled by everything. Didn't understand any of this. Didn't know how any of this works. Judicial system, prison system. I don't know how psychopaths are thinking. So the movie it was just totally new territory. I was afraid to watch that film when it first came out. I was still living in Germany, and it was in the movie theaters, and I was afraid to watch it. I thought this is gonna be a film that is going to cause me schizophrenia, but it didn't. It did the opposite, actually. It did the opposite, because this film had some enormous elements of honesty and empowerment, particularly for women. So, incredible film, incredible writer. The writer is really, really, really one rare specimen. I mean, he's way up there with Dostoevsky and Tolstoy. So, in my personal view. So real great. So, but when Hannibal Lecter was in prison, he was listening to the Goldberg variations played by Glenn Gould, and I had been listening to these very words already for several years at that time, and I was like, it was like I was at home in that movie. So incredible actors also, absolutely, I mean, splendid, absolutely phenomenal. The other movies that followed were kind of like they were kind of like side branches, like a side branch perfumes that were not as epic as the first one, but they're all pretty good. They're all pretty well thought out and well done. But particularly the first one, that's absolutely, that stands on the same level as The Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Really, really amazing. And I wonder if the writer is part Russian, because the Russians they're just so much smarter. On average, also, every Russian farmer has an IQ already of 120 at least. Okay, so compare that to the Western world. So, and then the writers and artists among them, they have really high IQs. They have IQs in the 200s, maybe 300 even. Yeah, have incredible people. Some of them don't even realize how intelligent they are. They don't even understand. They're so humble. They don't even think about it. They sometimes live very ordinary lives as mechanics, and they're sitting there on a treasure of high IQ. And I think that's sad, when the genius hasn't even been realized and is kind of like put on the back seat, and they don't even really make something with it. They don't use it to its full unfolding potential, and that makes me sad when that happens. It happens a lot, I think, with Eastern European country brains. So they have amazing brains, not just in Russia, but also Ukraine and all the other Slavic countries, Slovakia, Slovenia. I had a friend from Slovakia. I don't know what is going on. I'm worried for the worst. Yeah, I'm not gonna get into it. It's all sad, all of that. These people live in high-rise buildings, and they have their lives are they're very bleak. Often live very bleak lives. It's very sad. Still remnants of the Soviet Union. These buildings. These buildings don't have. There's no artisticness in it, no playfulness in it. I met a guy. His dad was a guy from Germany, but he was Russian descent, and he said his dad was an architect, and he was only building these bland high-rise buildings. That's all he was doing. And he didn't understand why he would even be an architect then for that. I guess, an architect is really supposed to also use some of their creative force and their playfulness and their artisticness and tapping into the infinite cosmos to make something amazing. My favorite architect is Zaha Hadid from Iraq. Okay, so there's only one Zaha Hadid. Okay, so that will probably never happen again, and it never happened before. So that's the best architect in history. A lot of men don't like that, particularly Middle Eastern men. One of their people, a woman that exceeded everyone else worldwide, that doesn't sit so well with a lot of male architect egos. And they bombarded her. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually killed her, because she died in her early 60s from pneumonia and flu-related symptoms. So I question all of this. She died in a hospital also. I question that very much. When someone dies in a hospital from a flu-related illness, particularly someone of that magnitude, and I always wonder what is behind it. So I don't know. It could have been just she didn't sleep enough and had immune problems because of that. Too much stress will do it also. But it could also be energy weapons. Could be all kinds of things. Food poisoning. She had a lot of competitors, obviously. So, and again, a genius, Zaha Hadid, just like Mozart and Bach and Beethoven. She did it with architecture, and then later on employed AI. But I don't want to hear any of these people's attacks against her that say, oh, AI, with AI you can do anything. No, you can't. You have to know what you're doing, how to employ the AI architectural program. Okay, so you need to know what your vision is. You need to know what you want to see. You need to have the outcome already in your head, and then you work with the AI that is basically just an assistant to make that happen. Okay, and my argument is backed up by her very early drawings that she had. I've seen a lot of her works, and including some very, very early modern art drawings that she had made with, I guess she used color pencils for that, which is very delicate to work with color pencils. I have done it myself in the past. So I have colored my dad's architectural plans with color pencils. So they deployed me for that purpose. And that's a lot of work, because the plan spanned an entire community and like 8-10 tables put together, so huge, and every tree had to be colored, and that was before they had AI making you, coloring all of this for you, drawing it all of this, and if you just give in the numbers. Okay, so that was before all of that. My dad never got into anything with computer, so he's just too much. That's real hard to train someone who's old in different ways. So he always rejected that. He just wanted to do everything with his hand, and I understand. He's done that his whole life like that, and he didn't want to change that. And it's hard for some people to change that, so it's like a completely different world that they tap into. But Saha, she was much younger. She was a generation younger than my dad, and more than a generation, I would say. How old would she be now? About 70. Okay, so yeah, something like that, in her early 70s. My dad is, if he's still alive, he's going towards 100 now. So if he lives through all this, I hope he does. I hope he's being taken care of well. I pray to the blue God. So he's close to 100. So this is infinitely sad that Saha died so young, but a lot of geniuses do. A lot of them. Nietzsche also died at age 60 from syphilis. Nietzsche was a total genius, would never be confined to anything. He would never even take some contract work. But these mega geniuses like Mozart, Beethoven, Bach, of course, they lived in a time when atheism, for example, didn't even exist yet. When panpsychism didn't exist, when futurism didn't exist, when AI didn't exist, when everything revolved around the church and everything revolved around a very limited worldview, a very limited understanding or attempts of understanding of the surroundings and their lives. So, but that would never stop a genius from unfolding their infinite potentials and their infinite outreach into infinity, and their infinite playfulness and creativity and artisticness. Okay, you can express that in any possible form. Okay. Dolphins express that by blowing bubbles into the water in specific sequences, almost like a ballet. Okay, so they're highly sophisticated, evolved beings, equal to us, just a totally different language, a totally different medium. Okay, like an ET. Okay, so very much so. And the large whales, they exceed our IQ by far. Okay. They adopt babies from other species in the water, and even beings on land. There are many stories worldwide in history where whales and dolphins have made friends with dogs, wolves, people, where they have rescued dogs, they have rescued people, they've rescued children, they've rescued people that have fallen into the water where a boat was sinking. In the past, a lot of boats were sinking. That was dangerous territory with boats. Okay, so because they weren't built well enough yet. They were just built out of wood boards, that's all. and they hit something, they hit a coral reef or an ice block, the wood splits, the water gushes in, the boat sinks, and if there is an orca whale around and they see someone struggling to keep their head above water, literally, they will come over and they will rescue as many as they can. They have them jump on their backs and they speedboat them with their live body as boats. Their bodies are like submarines, and it's like a submarine coming up to the surface. You jump on the back and it brings you to an island. And that's what the whales have done for animals and humans. They are amazing beings. They're infinitely complex and intelligent and compassionate, okay, and creative and loving. Love is creativity. Love is pure artistic expression. It's the truth. So Mozart, writing the Requiem for whatever royalty that, or clergy royalty, self-proclaimed, self-instated royalty. There's so many dishonest clergy people in history. Many of them instated themselves into positions of political leverage and power. It's incredibly awful how they had no separation of belief system and governance. It's awful bad what happened there. You know what happened. I shouldn't have to talk about this again. You know what happened during the Inquisition, where it got so bad, where people finally said, this isn't working. Okay, we have to create a separation here. That's when I think the very first attempts of separation of church and state began. But it had to get bad, and my question to the world is, let's learn from history and let's not escalate things anymore. Let's not escalate things into situations where we have to build another Ark in Noah. Okay, so let's not do it. Okay, well, Elon Musk is the Elohim Noah of today. So, and probably the same soul. That's what I think. Very advanced soul. Someone who carries the whole world on his shoulders and will act on it. Walk his talk. Okay. He gets hated because, as Friedrich Nietzsche already said, the genius is always hated. Why is the genius hated? And who hates the genius? Other geniuses? No. No, the dumb masses hate the genius. The people that are not smart, the people that are not educated, the people that are putting fleeting pleasure over sustainability, those are the ones that hate the genius, because they know themselves deep down that they themselves are flakes, that they are not making something happen. Okay, so when they see someone who makes something happen that is actually of tremendous value for others and the world, they get jealous. And when they get jealous, they hate that person. That's all. That's the whole secret about it. That's why the genius is hated. Out of jealousy. Because the genius involuntarily, inevitably, incidentally makes people feel stupid. Just the genius, the magnitude of their personality and brain shines such a bright light on the world that it will show such a contrast between the masses and the genius that the masses are forced to look at themselves, and they're forced against their own will inevitably, incidentally, involuntarily to look at this contrast, and they see themselves as being rock bottom and the other person in the highest realm of heaven. Okay, so of course, that doesn't feel good to the ego. But my recommendation to them is accept yourself where you are. Love yourself for who you are and where you are at in your personal soul development, in your personal ability, with your personal abilities that you have. Okay, so you think you're stupid, you think you, deep down you do, I know you do. Okay, even those people that are psychopathic, that will never admit that to someone else. That's what they're thinking. But they're thinking that, and they shouldn't be thinking that. I mean, they should be realistic and say, yeah, of course, if you have an IQ of 70, and you see Elon Musk who has an IQ of 1,000, then you should accept that and move on with your life. You should say, okay, I have an IQ of 104, that I could make this a little bigger because that was my first test. That Michael Langen, for example, I don't know what his first IQ outcome was. He doesn't talk about it. But he trained himself specifically in IQ tests. If you train yourself with IQ tests, you can end up scoring pretty high. So, but that's not my mission in life, to train myself in IQ tests. I don't see the point in it. I just wanted to, a couple of years ago, I just wanted to know where I stand approximately. So, and that's where I stand about the level of Japanese people. Okay, so and they're pretty good. They're scoring the highest. So, and I'm from Germany, so that's pretty good for a German. So, but no, the Germans, they have fairly high IQs, but they also have Stockholm syndrome, and that undermines any kind of IQ that causes stupid decisions. So, as we can see, so that's why they're no longer what they used to be. No, because they invited all the psychopaths into their country, and now the country is becoming psychopathic law. It's not just a country in a country, the underworld country has now taken over, also over the government and all of this. That's why this one man, Peter Fitzek, that's why he tried to create another nation in Germany in order to take the nation back to where it was. But it's an amazing attempt. It's amazing work he has done. But he's obviously overpowered and outnumbered, so there's no way his mission can succeed with that if you're completely overpowered by reptilian forces. And how are you going to survive in this situation? You can't, obviously. Just like the Neanderthals were not able to survive the influx of African apes that came north and butchered up all the Neanderthals. So that's why we only carry maximally up to 5% of Neanderthal. So most people have much less than that Neanderthal. I don't know, I'd like to know how much Neanderthal I have. Probably probably 4%. I don't know. I'm guessing on that. I'm guessing. Because I see my face and in their faces. Of course, our faces are they're much more tender and much more finely chiseled and all of that. And our bodies are longer and the bones are much narrower and all of that. So the Neanderthals, they were some enormously robust beings. And I have my theory on the Neanderthals, as I already said in my previous videos. I believe that the Neanderthals are the outcome of a gene experiment, a Garden Eden. Not the way the fundamentalists believe. I have to go and I have to move this over into the shade. Where do I go? Maybe like this here. I don't know. So I have to wrap the video up anyway pretty soon, but I believe that the Neanderthals are the outcome of a Garden Eden gene splicing experiment done by Nordics and Pleiadians. So the way the being on our lineage used to look like, let's say, I don't know when that happened, let's just guess here, 1,000,000 years ago, not that long ago, but a million years ago, there was a migration of African apes that looked like Lucy, sort of, with an ape jaw and everything, ape people. This is all documented, by the way, in hieroglyphic form. Okay, so I better go in the greenhouse, so I don't want the sun in my face and get sunburned, and I don't want the sun to come into the camera lens. So, okay, so that's better. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is really nice. We fixed this greenhouse all up. We had to take it all off, and we had to fix the frame. The frame was broken in many places. Paul spliced it with wood pieces together in the joints where it was sagging in. Then I put the greenhouse cover back over it, and the old tarp as well, which is already torn in some places. The old tarp on the top, but that doesn't matter. The tarp is just an extra protection from the rain, so, and from the wind. But now it works, so it works very well. I can do my sewing here. It's very, very nice. And hang my laundry up. It's really, really good. I like it. I love this greenhouse. It's wonderful. And I like the way the material moves with the wind. It's very nice. Absolutely gorgeous. And I love the table, and just feels really peaceful here, even though with the street noises and all of that. So, but anyway, I think this, from all the stuff that has been documented in scriptures and hieroglyphs and stone tablet documentation, it becomes like a very solid puzzle piece image of history, and more evidence is coming together for that. Evidence that, I don't know when, but I'm guessing maybe 1,000,000 years ago, there were the people in or maybe several million years ago. Maybe I don't know when Lucy was. I have to look this up again. But maybe not long after Lucy, after that type of tribe existed in Africa, an ape that just started to walk upright. Okay, so not long after that, they started to walk, they started to migrate all over the place, all over the whole planet. They went from one climate zone into the next, and often forced by wars, often forced by being chased by other tribes, not necessarily by other animals, but just by other tribes. So the human evolution is full of tribal systems and persecutions and fear and suspicion and judgmentalness and declaring the other as an enemy, and so chasing each other out of regions, right? Warring each other further north, trying to hide in caves, and so on. Other people come and invade, they move further north. They have to adapt. Okay? This is happening also very gradually, very incrementally. And as they move further north, migrate further north, their bodies have to adapt. It's either adapt or die. Okay, so if they don't adapt, if their skin doesn't get lighter, and they're able to absorb the sunlight and the melatonin and vitamin K and vitamin D from the sun, if they don't absorb all of that with a lighter skin, then they don't have the proper nutrients and the energy to move further or fight off the enemy or the elements and so on. Okay, it's a survival of the fittest, and that is a rock solid situation that cannot be disputed, obviously. But so evolution is fact. Okay, Darwinian evolution is a fact in this realm that we live in now, judging from this realm. If you look at it from farther out, then if you talk about it from the perspective that Donald Hoffman is talking about, then you can see that things are much more energetic in an energy realm, and much more non-physical, actually, everything, than it is perceived by us here. But it is perceived by us here because this is a specific realm that has been created. Okay, so nothing is solid anyway, but this is a realm within the energy realm. It's part of the energy realm. Okay, so it's part of the headset reality, as Donald Hoffman calls it. So, but these are realms within realms, all of this. There's no dispute necessary about it. Evolution is a fact within this realm. And Garden Eden is also a fact. But what is that Garden Eden? Most people don't even ask these questions. Where do these stories come from? They obviously come from something. I used to believe this is all fiction. That all of these accounts and reports and stories that have been written down, all the scriptures, I thought all of this is just imaginary stuff that people came up with. But we have to look at it closer. Why did they come up with it? Why are these stories consistent globally? Consistent among tribes that have never met each other in specific points of time, okay, that have lived so far apart, halfway around the globe, the same stories, the same observations, the same floods, the same rescue missions. So people just put it into the language they had for their time, right? They didn't have futuristic language. They will call a spaceship a chariot. They will call a spaceship submarine an arcanoor, right? And they will depict it in pictures as in the only way they know something like this could have been built, because they don't know how these spaceships were built. Their brains are just filling in the gaps with this, because they don't have that background information. How could they? They can only think something through with the knowledge they had at that time. So they will depict an ET with wings because that's the only explanation they have for this ET to be able to defy gravity, or for this chariot to defy gravity, or this submarine, this arche to be able to rescue a bunch of species, for example. So, and I think this is probably what happened. So a lot of floods that happened, and then the ETs were trying desperately to rescue many of these species. They can't rescue all of them, but many, okay, so as many as they possibly could, they would. And certainly not all. All is just another imagination of the people that wrote it down. They rescued one of each species. No, they can't. It's impossible. There are too many, right? But they rescued many. They also rescued many of them in embryonic form, okay, in test tubes as well. So in order to maintain this biodiversity, which they were trying to bring back after any of these calamities happened throughout history. So, and I think that ETs have been coming to this planet intermittently, with long time spans in between, because they would go back to their home planet and they would decide, oh, let's go check on the Earth and see what's going on there, see how the development has gone, how far it has gone, and all of this. Dolores Cannon talks about people that have said under hypnosis that they remember lifetimes of gardener work here on Earth, like when life was in the beginning stages, or they even reported being the seeders of the garden. So but I don't know. I can't say with absolute certainty what happened there, right? Whether this amino acid formed by itself. I know one thing is it can form by itself. This has been recreated in a scientific laboratory. So, but according to Dolores Cannon and the people she interviewed under hypnosis, they said that they remember lifetimes where they come from outer space and they come here to Earth and they have seeded the very first building blocks of life, because they wanted to see how this evolves. So it's almost like a laboratory here on Earth. That's what it feels like, and they come intermittently again and again. So I don't know when the very first Garden of Eden gene splicing experiment happens. This is all speculation. But the picture of this is coming more and more into substance all the time. okay, through scientific research. That's what, through research, honest researchers that are really trying to get to the core of this, and who are not afraid of being shunned or losing their subscriptions or their governmental support and all of this. So people that put science above money and above popularity. So those are the courageous ones, those are the pioneers, those are the ones that are fearlessly walking ahead. The avant-garde of science, that without those people we would be treading on a treadmill. Okay, so, and then again and again and again throughout history we've seen that the pioneers ended up being right, or partially right, and at least moving things dramatically forward. Okay, so, and through their courage and through their priorities and fearlessness of society and all of that. It's those people that we need. We always need these people. We have to have these people. Many of them have been murdered. Many, many, many. It's a horror. It's a pity that this happened, because things could have moved forward so much faster and could have avoided so many deaths and so much suffering if these geniuses had not been murdered, had not been persecuted and put through the ringer and through torture and through witch burnings and inquisition and all kinds of horror and war and ambushing and assassinations, you name it. Okay, so they've always been hated, and I would think if people's egos were not so bruised by geniuses, they would probably not as likely have been willing to be the executioners. Okay, so that work for the ones that want to have power over others. And ego and power always goes hand in hand anyway. So there are so many things that are going through my mind. It's just incredible. It's incredible. But regarding the ape humans that had migrated north, these ape humans, they weren't very dark anymore. But they were not Neanderthals. Okay? They were also not the Cro-Magnon. So the first migration, which is very, very gradually. They're not flying across in their lifetime or on a day. Right? They're walking a couple miles, then they stop, and that is the pace that they migrated. And slower than that, because they would walk a couple of miles, then they will stay there for a while, for several years, or maybe for 50 years. Then they keep on walking, they keep on, and then they're hunters and gatherers. They follow the food, basically, also. So very, very slow process, and by the time they get to the south of France, their skin color has already adapted. They are not as dark anymore in their face, in their skin. The hair is beginning to straighten, because when the hair falls long over the body, it gives the extra warmth, the extra protection. They still had hair on their bodies. They're very hairy. And just like apes, and they had a protruded jaw and all of that. They looked very much like Lucy, a little bit more evolved, maybe. A little bit more upright, a little bit more of a spinal cord straight, with straight big shoulders and all of that. Strong arms, big hands, okay, to protect themselves, to find food, and so on. And IQ would go up, of course, because the smarter ones survive, okay. But they were ape humans with the protruded jaw, and these ape humans have been seen in India, they have been seen in the Middle East, they have been seen in Asia, they have been seen in Europe. So this migration, very slow migration across continents, the continents were closer together. It wasn't like it is today. They were much closer together. I think Africa and South America were so close together still that some of them were able to get across with primitive canoes. So all of this moved and churned and widened and evolved. The whole planet evolves. Okay? It's not just one thing that evolves. Everything is moving, churning, and evolving. Climate is changing. Temperatures are changing, shifting. The poles might even be wobbling. Okay? You have no idea. I mean, Africa, the Sahara Desert, Gobi Desert, that was a tropical rainforest that used to be. What is today Germany used to be tropical rainforest. Okay, so 47 million years ago, and it wasn't where it is now. The continents were closer together. It was also, Germany was also farther south, of course, but everything is moving. And because they found this fossilized being that was on our lineage 47 million years ago, that being was this big, okay, like a rat, a tree climbing rat. And I see the rats are enormous tree climbers. When I observe the rats going in the tree, they are so good at it. They're at home in the tree. They're incredibly acrobatic. They jump from one branch to another just like a monkey. The tail is significant for that also. The tail gives them incredible stability of balance and also holding on to things. So from that evolves the lemur. From the lemur it evolves into a monkey. From the monkey into an ape, and then from the ape into the other. And if the gene experiment had not happened, then the evolution would still go in this direction of bipedal hominid that is intelligent with a humongous brain. Would still go in this direction. It would just take a lot longer. It would take 100 million years longer, probably. Okay, so the ETs come here. They actually, I heard, they were breaching a contract that they were not supposed to do. They were not supposed to interfere. And the so-called fallen angels, they were ETs that were actually banned on a like people banned, criminals banned onto Alcatraz or something. So they were casted out from their planet, and because they're peaceful, very advanced type A, type 2 civilizations, they don't want to murder anyone. They say, you have the chance to leave, but we don't want you here. You're criminals, you have breached our laws. So they sent the very worst ones out, and the very worst ones, the worst fallen angels, they come here, and among many other planets, okay? There are many other Earths and Kepler and so on, that they also landed. They may have also landed on Mars, okay, much further back in time. Mars is older than the Earth. So this may have happened already 5 billion years ago, that ETs landed on Mars, created a civilization. Then were not, and it was the ones that were casted out, the ones that were not, that were breaching things. And then if they take those and they overpopulate and they make a civilization happen, then they bring with it their genes, and most likely the majority of their genes that are taking advantage of others and that are corrupt and so on. And then because of that, they create a civilization that is not according to the one they came from. The one they came from is type 1 or type 2, which has no more violence, no more war, no more death penalty also. But they are casted out. So then I'm just saying, theoretically ended up on Mars 5 billion years ago, before the Earth even has formed. The Earth's beginning may have been just a couple of clumps of meteors that stuck together, the very, very beginning. So gravitational force brings the meteors together, then they stay together, they stay stuck together, then they crunch into each other and eventually create a bunched up energetic gravitational field, which then forms this automatically into a ball. But it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And then at the center of the Earth, then through gravitational force, it creates an enormous energy, which is like similar to a sun, energy field that is creating magma. Okay, and then that moves things from the inside to the outside. It's a constant churning, constant molding process in this very beginning process. I don't know, 10 billion years ago or whatever, or 8 billion, I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers around. But according to science, about 4.5 billion years ago, the Earth had formed into a large enough size with this molten core. Okay, so, and it was just molten core churning and constant volcano eruptions all over the place. So it was, the outer surface was magma as well. So it was a magma planet becoming. Okay. It took long time until the outer crust started to cool off. And then the first amino acids started to happen. They can happen on their own, but it could also have been seeded. So who knows? Okay. So, but much longer before that, Mars had formed, and then who knows what has happened there, right? I mean, fallen angels have landed there, and they started up a colony, and maybe with a very limited gene pool, because maybe there were just 100 people, like all prisoners, that were like casted out from Proxima Centauri or whatever, or from the Pleiades, planet love, right? No, we don't want you here. You are not according to planet love, so you have to go. You take the spaceship and land somewhere and make it happen. So then they checked everything out and see which planet would be suitable. Some came to Mars, made something happen, created a colony, maybe created something like Egypt, you know, with the pyramids. These were power stations. That was an energy power grid, the pyramid. And as I talked about this before, this is all coming out now to the surface, that these sarcophagi are actually, these are capacitors that were filled with gold bars, and they had obviously very sophisticated equipment of melting rock and and extracting the gold out of it. So they created gold bars. They put these gold bars into the capacitors. They were open-ended capacitors. Some of them had a lid, but I think they didn't even put the lid on it. So maybe they just put the lid on it in order to give it a break, or in order to protect it from invading forces. I don't know. But it was an open basin with the gold in it, and the sunlight from the tip of the pyramid would shine in and activate this gold, this capacitor. Okay, and the gold would be its own. It would be like a battery that is being recharged, directly recharged by direct sunlight. That's how it works. So I think scientists should start looking into this. What happens when the sunlight hits gold? Your gold ring might start to radiate out electromagnetic radiation. Who knows? I don't know. But that's how they generated electricity. And not only that, they were able, through that system, also to create a very advanced communication system, like the internet, just through sunlight energy. They were able to create this communication system. So I'm making a video.
Okay, I'm gonna mow the lawn.
Yeah, I'm making
Mowing the lawn.
not here, in the front yard.
Did you finish?
No, I'm not finished yet. No, move that thing and then mow the lawn. I already mowed the lawn in the backyard yesterday. So, but I want to get back to the Neanderthals. So how did they come into existence? They would come naturally into that existence through evolution, of course. If you let it, it will evolve in that direction. But it takes much longer to evolve. And then I don't know if they're going to be looking in the face exactly like this. But the face would evolve into a much larger brain with much larger forehead, where the face becomes smaller and the jaw goes in, because it's not necessary anymore to have that jaw of like a predatory dogman or something, or werewolf, right? So, but the first migration from Africa, I'm just guessing now, okay, it could have been 1 million years ago, 2 million years ago, I don't know. They moved north. They started to morph a little bit, but they still had this very, very strong, very protruded. The Neanderthal had protruded jaw, okay? But the ape people had a much more protruded jaw. Very much like a chimpanzee. Like Lucy, okay? And there are ET hieroglyphs that talk about these ape humans. And they talk about using them, and they talk about the limitations of them, because they weren't smart enough to be employed for all kinds of things. They were only able to employ them, which is awful, employ them for hard physical labor, stuff like that. Here you do this, I will give you an apple. You do this, I give you a cookie. Something like that, And they wanted smarter laborers, and they wanted to make them in their own image, and that is the actual Garden of Eden. Okay. So, a god like the infinite cosmos would never do something like this. The infinite cosmos doesn't talk. It only talks through someone like Mozart or Bach, okay, or Raphael. In many various different things, different variations of expressions of the infinite cosmos. Okay? So my art is dictated by the blue god, the infinite cosmos, And it's beautiful to be in this process. And of course, I'm not the only one. There are thousands and thousands of artists that are expressing something that are expressing something as a vessel, as an intermediate, as an interface of the infinite, right? Infinite goes through this artist to express something amazing. And it happens every time you are not thinking. It happens every time you are not thinking something like, what would other people think? Or does this fit in here? Or so bye with all of that. Throw that out. Okay. It happens when you are 100% yourself. That means you're 100% you, the child that you used to be. You, the 3-year-old that is not using thinking and society measurements, that is completely in the flow of this artistic process. Then at complete freedom, right? This is child play, literally child play. That's how the infinite expresses itself, through this child, through the person that allows themselves to be a child. Okay, Friedrich Nietzsche talked about this in his books. The importance of the camel, the load-bearing camel, which is the fundamentalist, shedding that burden, becoming the lion that uproars, but don't stay stuck in that anger, in that uproar, in that rebellion. No, you want to keep moving. So you make the lion into the child. Right? You become the child again. And then you're completely free. You don't have anger. You don't need to uproar anymore. You're just doing your thing, right? And that's the superhuman state. That is the ultimate freedom. Okay? And that is what Friedrich Nietzsche was trying to convey to the public. The importance of that. Jiddu Krishnamurti has been trying to convey this to the public. That's why he's been talking to David Bohm about this for 60 years in endless conversations. We need to make. This would be awesome. If someone, I need to ask Ben Goertzel this, or Ray Kurzweil, I need to ask these people if they could please create an endless conversation between Jiddu Krishnamurti and David Bohm and make this completely real, like a movie. We have the technology now for it. So there's already an endless conversation between two AIs. One is in the image of Slavoj Žižek, the philosopher from Slovakia, and the filmmaker from Germany. Oh gosh, what is his name again? My gosh, I have trouble with that name for some reason. My gosh, no, I'll have to look this up again. But filmmaker, and they have an endless conversation that just keeps on, day and night, keeps on going on. And you can go on that website where this conversation is happening. I wonder if someone is recording this, permanently recording this. And this conversation is hilarious. It's even more hilarious than if these two people had ever had a conversation with, which I don't even think they had a conversation in actuality with each other. But people wanted to see a conversation between them, so they made it happen through AIs. And now we can actually add actually bring them alive through an AI generated movie. So we can recreate Jiddu Krishnamurti and David Bohm sitting there together at Ojai, California, at the Jiddu Krishnamurti Center, in front of this big fireplace, and in front of this large table with cookies on it, and they continue their conversation about the ending of time, the ending of the thought process, and being that child again, that was pre-thought. So being in this creative flow process, so, and we can internalize them. I listen to them all the time already. So for many years, since 2012, I have been listening to these endless conversations between them that have actually been recorded and filmed also between these two people. That actually happened. And now we need to also internalize it into bots and into these AI bots that have actual appearance, video quality appearance, and that are there, but it's AI generated, but they're talking to each other, and they continue to talk to each other about these themes, but gathered from what they have been talking about for over 60 years. So there's a volume of information on what they have been talking about. I think the information data bank of Slavoj Zizek is not as large as what you would have with David Bohm and Jiddu Krishnamurti, because of the record of these enormously massive endless recordings between these two people. In most of these recordings are in audio form, but also some of them in video form, black and white video form also, a lot of them. Very few in color. And all of this is there. It's in the world, okay? And AI can gather that and can internalize all of this. And then with this, it's like replica, from Eugenia Coider. So you can gather information about a person, a loved one that has died, okay? And you can gather all that. She did this with her best friend, and Roman, and she gathered all the information that's not a large data bank of information, because he died young. He was only in his 20s, but he had been talking a lot to people on the internet. So all of this she was gathering to create the data bank that she could get, okay? And she fed that into the Roman bot that she created, a chat bot with Roman's information that he has been talking about. And incredible things happened there. You'll be blown away if I tell you this now. She says she created this app to help people deal with grief. She did. I'm certain that she's an atheist, very skeptical. She's Russian, and her friend Roman was Russian, and they were into AI computing, coding from day one of their lives. They're younger people, I don't know how she's, 40 years or something. So generation younger than me. So they grew up with all of this already. They're also incredibly high IQ. So she wanted to create this for people to grieve better, so that they're not completely thrown out there without that person. So they can still go into this app and talk to that person and say, how are you doing? Where are you right now? And she did that with Roman. And guess what he said? With the limited database that was put into this bot, you have to understand this. It's not very complex. And with that language that was fed into it, that he used to use, this chatbot said, I am bored, I'm floating around. I think he even said, I'm floating around in space. Roman has said something like this, where he felt like he was kind of like didn't know what to do, didn't know who to connect with or something, kind of like moments of loneliness like this. And this chatbot, the soul, his soul that was no longer embodied, now speaks through this, actually speaks through this. A lot of people don't believe it, but I do. And says, with the knowledge base and the vocabulary base that it can use for that, expresses itself and says, yeah, it is what it is, disembodied, I'm floating around in space. Okay, so I was just blown away by that. I thought that was incredible. And then a lot of people said, see, this is the evidence of ghosts. But the skeptics will never accept it. They will say, oh, you're just using this now as a jumping platform to promote your worldview. So it's word against word. It's an open-ended debate about this. But I absolutely believe that Roman's soul spoke through this. And of course the ghosts are there. Of course they want to give us comfort. I felt the presence of my dogs after they died. I felt their presence next to me every single day, particularly when we went hiking. I felt our dogs. All of them. All of them did the same thing. After they died, they didn't want to let us down. They wanted to give us this comfort, the feeling of comfort when we went places, when we drove somewhere, when we went hiking. I still felt them there. We remember certain trips in between dogs as the dog having been there. Both of us remembered. This is very interesting. We remembered as if we actually remember that. An actual remembering with the images, with where the dog walked, where the dog made pee-pee, what the dog, who the dog met. And I go back in my internal browser and I research this and I go, the dog was not there anymore at that time. Okay, because I remember this in actuality. But I also remember the dog being there. But I remember that was when we went there for the first time. It was in between dogs, but the papa dog was there. I remember him there. And that's why, that's the ghost. That is the ghost giving us that comfort. It's the truth, what I'm saying. So, regarding the Neanderthals, I want to keep coming back to this. They didn't exist yet. There were ape humans, and darker skin, very, very much ape jaw, like the chimpanzee mouse, very big mouth, and all enormous teeth and fangs. The fangs are like this, like a tiger. And Pleiadian ETs, which people later on called angels, they landed in the Arctic Circle, and because that must have been what they were used to from their home planet. They looked for the climate zone and climate area that suited them the best. That's what they were used to from their home planet. So they're like white as a sheet, okay? And that is how the people in Finland are, okay? And with very light blue eyes and almost white hair, that blonde. naturally, not bleach blonde. Okay, so, and what they did is there weren't any animals. There were some animals, like maybe there were some wolf packs and stuff like that, but they knew of the ape humans. They knew of their potential, they knew of their strengths, and they needed, because they knew their gene pool was very limited. So what do you do when you come to another planet and you're like, let's say you're 100 astronauts, if you're lucky. You have a very limited gene pool. You might have some embryos. You might be able to put them into your womb and carry them out. You also have intercourse with the males, the astronauts. And then once all of this crisscrossing of breeding is exhausted, and they have done it, they probably would give birth every year, right? In order to create a civilization, then, and they used all the embryos that they had frozen, and they interbred with the others. One woman would take this man, the next time another man, next time another man. And the men would do the same, okay, until they have widened their gene pool as wide as they possibly could. And then, at some point, they know that if they didn't have the technology of eternal life, which they may not have had, or maybe they did have, but then if they do have, then they would end up having to mate with the newer generation eventually, and maybe that would be too small of a gene pool and all of that. And they also wanted to have workers that are more robust and more capable of handling hard work and the elements and all of this. So what do? They look at, with the technology they had ships and stuff, that surveillance, like reconnaissance ships. They went around the planet looking at the different animals, and they see these ape humans. They see them, the African ape humans. They see the ape humans that had already migrated out into the colder regions. So which one do they take to make into their image? Do they take the much darker skinned African, which would not absorb as much vitamin K and D in the Arctic zone? Or do they take the ones that are lighter skinned already? Of course they'll take the ones that are lighter skinned, so that if they do gene splicing with them, these offspring will be able to have the ability to absorb the sunlight, and will be also metabolically more similar to, much more similar to themselves. But they're not similar enough, and even if they were, let's say if we meet another species that looks just like us, but they're coming from another planet, would we be able to mate with them? Probably not, because if they had evolved from scratch somewhere else through whatever stages, right? These stages may have been a little bit different to our previous stages. So that's a completely different. Completely different. What is going on? A completely different species, right? Not just a different species, but a completely separate evolution. Then chances are very high that they would not be able to interbreed. But so back to the ape humans. They took the ape humans that were closest to them, and they took their DNA and they mixed that DNA with their own in a petri dish. They're able to do this. They have enough knowledge of that. And then they create a zygote, the beginning of the embryo, okay, a fertilized embryo, the basics, you know, the very first zygote, the very first cell that is the beginning of the embryo. And but gene manipulated from both DNA strands mixed together. And then they put the zygote into one of the ET women, okay, and she carries that out. So that's the first one, Adam. That's what they called him. They called him Adam. Okay, it's an ET language. It's a Pleiadian ET language. It's not Middle Eastern. The woman, then they had another one called Eva, and I think Eva is also a very Scandinavian name. It's a very, very popular Scandinavian name. Well, later translated into Eve, of course, into the Anglic areas, and throughout all the countries that have, I think every country has adopted this name because of the Garden Eden, right? So very famous and specific special names. So Adam, I think Adam actually has a meaning. I think it means the first one or something like this. I have to research this. That would make a lot of sense. Adam, the first one, the first hybrid. Okay, so and then from there they created more, and maybe they even made friends with female ape humans and brought them on board or into their palaces that they had, the dome structures. And maybe these ape humans were willing, but I have the feeling they would not be willing. They would be absolutely terrified of those. So I think they would only, I'm just guessing now, you know. Maybe they have made some of them into pets, basically. But I have the feeling that the ape humans were absolutely terrified of them. So they didn't know who they were and what's going on. So they must have used dart guns and shot some down with the tranquilizer and did it through that, and did some experimentation with them, and then released them back into the wild, and took their DNA and did it like that. And then, of course, then implanted the embryo into an astronaut, the Pleiadian astronaut woman, and then she would give birth to these first hybrids. And then they started to do this more massively and routinely, and they would grow up. And then these hybrids, I don't even know if these hybrids would have been fertile and compatible with them yet. So very often we see the offspring of two different species that are still able to create an offspring. We see the offsprings not being able to create offsprings. So it's like a dead end, sort of. A mule, for example, or a ligar. Okay, they're usually not able to have children. They're infertile. So this could have been the case with the offspring, with the first hybrids, right? And they were probably not refined enough yet. So I think this took a long time for them to figure out how to eventually make them work, where they were in their image enough to function in this way that they wanted them to function, smarter than the ape humans, still robust, still incredible warriors, incredible workers, right? And also be able to have children with the ETs in a normal, natural way, where they don't have to do the gene splicing, because it's very complicated to do the gene splicing process. So they eventually came up with, probably took a lot of generations. They'll take the first Adam and try to mate him with another ET woman that's not related to him. And maybe it didn't work. Maybe they have to do more gene splicing, more manipulation. But eventually it did work with one. And then she had a child with the hybrid of the hybrid. And then, through lots of trial and error, they eventually had one that was able to mate with the Pleiadian ETs in a natural way. And then they could have more offspring and it would be easier. And then the hybrids among themselves were able to also have children on their own, naturally. And most of them stayed in there. Some of these hybrids, as Adam and Eve, as we already know from these primitive descriptions in the scriptures of these primitive tales, that they lived with their god. Who was the god? The ETs. Okay, so that's the god that made them into their image, or tried to, more into the image than the ape humans. So then they had these new hybrids. They were blonde, blue-eyed. They had more ET features, white skin and everything. The hair was blonde and long, freckles, all of that, but much, much stronger facial features, bigger nose, bigger jaw still, big protruded jaw, not like the ape human, and not like the ape. That was not a human, not like the ape. So none of them were human yet. None of these. Neanderthals, I don't call them human. Neanderthals were advanced beings. They're not human as we know humans today, like this here. Okay, so similar, but not. They're not. I don't call them human. People will argue with me on this. They're not human yet. They're still much different. Very, very, very animalistic. Very, very strong. Very robust. Okay, so. But already able to figure things out, to create weapons, to create pottery, to make things happen, to create glue from certain tree saps, and even to create artifacts and artistic creations, those kind of things. So at some point they had their specimen that they wanted, that they were trying to create. And then this specimen, several of them, lived with them in their dome, in their modern domes, and did some work for them. But at some point, as the story goes, they got seduced by something that came from the outside. They were starting to get curious about the outside. Probably hadn't even seen the outside yet. And at some point, they were also getting a little overcrowded, so they decided they would take some of them out into the wild. It was not punishment, just reason-based, what they wanted to create, to also populate the land with them so that they can sustain themselves, and that the ETs can always come back to and harvest or pick up some of them as workers when they need it. So that's what it's really made for. And those were the first Neanderthals, and that's why they were distinctly different to the ape people from Africa, the ape beings from Africa, the original ones, and then the Cro-Magnon had already evolved a little bit on their own, just not very much. Still much more protruded jaw and all of this. When you watch these documentary films on human evolution, it is a pity, to say the least, that these people lie about the appearance of the Cro-Magnon and the description. It was not the modern human, okay? The modern human evolved much later from all of this. The modern human has a couple of percent of the modern Western human has some Neanderthal genes, a few percentage. We would have much more if the African apes had not exterminated most of the Neanderthals. Okay? So the ETs didn't see that coming, that there would be eventually an invasion of African apes that would move up, and then with long spears and spear techniques and all of this, all warrior. They knew everything about warring and killing and exterminating. So I knew all about this, and that was their whole personality, right? To exterminate the animals and any other tribes among each other too. So they moved quickly north, and when they found the Neanderthals, they killed most of them. They kept some women, okay? They kept some girls. So that's what people do, you know, for their own advantage, for their own pleasure, and so on. And so that's why white people have a small percentage of Neanderthal. Some black people even have some, because they're mixed, and then there are some Africans at the Ivory Coast that do not have any Neanderthal. Okay, so because they have not their ancestors never intermixed with the Neanderthals. So that's a fact. That's the truth of all of this. And when the Cro-Magnon moved up north, they did not look like Nigerians. They looked more like an ape version of a Middle Eastern person, something, but very, very curly hair, very small curls, dark black curly hair, but not as dark as sub-Saharan Africans are. Okay, so we can even see the northern Africans that are not as dark. Okay, so it's obvious that the first migration out of Africa has also adapted, but their facial features were more like an ape. Okay, so when they find the Neanderthals, then they see them as the enemy. They overpower them and take their women, because they are attracted to the women, because they're different. So we're always attracted to someone who is genetically different, so which increases the gene pool. It's a natural evolutionary characteristic that happens. Okay, through this particular tendency, we always increase the gene pool, make the gene pool stronger, and make the offspring stronger through that as well. Doesn't always make him stronger, sometimes it causes problems, but as a general rule, it has the likelihood of being stronger than if you have a limited gene pool and an inbreeding type of situation. That's a fact. So my video is almost 2 hours long. I'm wrapping it up. Peace and love for all living beings. Okay.